So welcome everybody. This is the first live Q&A. When I first started the online masterclass course, I thought we were just going to do pre-recorded question answers videos to the questions, and then some people said, "Oh, could we do a live one?" So I thought, why not? Let's give it a go. And so this is the first one of it, and I didn't think there was going to be too much formality to it, depending on how many people turned up. So last night, when I thought about how we could run this, I thought if we had 16 people, we could literally go around the room one by one and ask the question. And I'm sure each of the questions would be relevant at some level to everybody else. So that's how I'd planned to do it. And if we had even more than 16 people, I was just going to do it via the chat box rather than face-to-face. But because there's a small group of us here, I don't think there's any reason why we can't just do it face-to-face, and you can unmute yourself and ask your question, and potentially, depending on how much you've used the game, some people might have answers to also share to whatever the questions are. So it'll be a little bit more interactive potentially than what it would have been if we had lots of people. Yeah. So has everybody finished the course? The online course still going? Okay. Just to give me context, whereabouts is everybody up to so far? Maybe Cheryl, you share quickly where you've got to.
Coming up to about 40% of the way through. I'm doing other courses at the moment, so I'm a bit distracted. I'm doing the Yale Science of Wellbeing course I've just started, which is very relevant as well. So kind of dipping in and out of both.
Yeah, sure, nice. And Nat, whereabouts are you up to?
I'm about 75% through, so finished the workshop, but up to the tracking.
Oh yeah, okay, yeah, lovely, yeah, nice. And Simone, have you got on with it?
Oh, I've only just really started. I dipped in a few videos, so I would say maybe 15% done. But yeah, it's on my list of.
Yeah, well, you've got a bit more experience in it anyway.
True,
yeah. Astrid, how have you got on?
I'm actually in the middle of section 2.
Okay, nice. So you've kicked off. Everybody's kicked off. At least that's the main thing. Yeah. Okay. Well, I don't know. Why don't we? Who does anybody have the most burning, or think they've got a really burning question? Does anybody want to start, and then we can just open the floor up from then?
I don't know. Happy to start. Go, Astrid.
Okay. Maybe it's not a burning question, but I remember the video you posted about when you did the icebreaker. Exercise, and there were two people. One said, I don't care what my people feel, I just want them to perform. And I was just interested if you could share a little bit more about how you approached this, because I think it's a bit of a bummer, and then it's probably a challenge to not get into defensive mode, because you know how good this method works. And so I was just
I think you bring up a really good point. It's important that we, as the facilitator or the person in there consulting, doesn't get defensive about the game or the conversation. And I remember that specifically because I'm pretty sure that was my first ever commercially paid workshop I ran. So I was in the cauldron, and it was at a construction company. So it was sort of a perfect storm, because the construction, maybe up until recently, I would have thought construction people would be the least likely people to want to lean into this conversation, just if I was stereotyping construction people a little bit here. And so that's why I remember it so much. And there was only one female in that group, in that senior leadership team. She was the only woman on the senior leadership team of 10, I think. And so it caught me by surprise, but also when I look back on it, I think I can sort of understand where she was coming from, because she was in a room of a lot of masculinity, surrounded by and potentially wanting to portray herself in a way that was aligning with what I sensed was in the way that the rest of the leaders were, which is a very masculine, macho type leadership group, which was really interesting. And my first reaction was I wanted to fight that and prove her wrong and tell her why I didn't think that was right. But then I think at the time, because of my naivety, I thought it's probably best not to get in an adversarial type moment here, where I'm trying to convince her why this is important and why she should not have that point of view. early on in that workshop, because that was quite early on. That was when we pulled literally when we pulled the cards out of the box around the table. And I thought, okay, I'm just going to let her express what she's feeling here, because clearly she's got these deep-seated feelings around and perspectives and beliefs around this. So I thought, I'm just going to let her vent, so to speak. And my hope was at the time that going through that exercise should then potentially change her mindset about it. And I can't tell you directly now because I didn't go back in and I haven't chatted to her since then, but my hope was that going through the workshop should then slowly change her belief around that mindset. But rather than making it a me versus her, or her beliefs are wrong and my beliefs are right, I just wanted to let her rant or vent, and then have her go through the experience. And then the collective at the end of that session, it was quite contagious as well, because a couple other people around the table you could see them sort of start to feel that same way as well, right? It's like, oh yeah, of course, we just want them to do that. But by the end of it, I know this happened because the CEO said we need to now buy 60 packs of cards for all of our leaders to run this. And so I think through the experience, she might have come to a different belief or a slightly different mindset around it. But certainly my first reaction wasn't to get in the adversarial role. It was to let her express that, because I was new in the room. I didn't know her personally. I didn't know what her style was like. I got a sense of it in that moment, but I was like, I'm just going to let her. And I think if it happens to you as well, just let those people say those things and let them express that, because it's almost a natural, from my experience so far, it's like a sort of an impulsive response to some people. Oh, this shit doesn't matter. Or what do you mean? I just need them to do their effing job. And it's like it's an ingrained response. That's what I've started to realize. You can tell the people who just straight off the bat go, no, or I don't believe it. And you just let them have that and let them sit in that. Mm-hmm. So certainly, yeah, trying to not to get an adversarial, not to convince her, let the game, let the process maybe do that. And the final thing potentially is, at the end of the day, we're not going to be able to convince everybody. So out of a team of 10, having one person who's doesn't believe, having 10% of the room is probably actually not a bad percentage, a rate of percentage rate. I don't think in anything we do, maybe some stuff, but maybe not everything we do. It's going to be hard to get 100% of people believing fully in what we're doing, regardless of the thing you're bringing into the room. And so only having 1 out of 10 for me is a bright spot, actually, because you have 9 out of the 10 people who love it. And it's like, okay, how can we now focus on those 9 out of 10 people? And hopefully the immune system will then, or the one is black hat of the word, or the one naysayer will then slowly come around based on the 9 people who are believing it and now discussing it. So that's sort of the mindset I take to it. It's certainly not prove they're wrong. It's let them have their say, go through the process, and hope that the group, this is when herd mentality potentially is a good thing. Let the herd mentality of the group sway or switch or influence the one person who's not it. Yeah. But I do remember I've had a couple other times where my instinctual response is I need to prove that they're wrong. And I used to spend a lot of time and energy on that in the first year or so, going, I need to convince everybody that this matters. And I realized I was using up a lot of energy, a lot of willpower, a lot of mental strength, a lot of emotional strength, convincing them, rather than going in a workshop. If I've got 6 out of 10 who really love it, it's not to say I'm ignoring the others, but I'm focusing more of my attention and energy on making sure that they're really attuned, because I've seen it happen in other workshops as well, where I had a session with, I won't name the company, an insurance company in New Zealand. And I walked in the room. I'm not sure if I've shared this story before. I walked in the room and it was the frostiest reception in a workshop I've ever had. So a really corporate environment. And I walked in the room, and the leader, I sat down, everybody's around the table already. And I sat down at the head of the table, and everybody's just staring at me. Nobody said anything. The leader didn't even introduce me. And I had the box of cards on the table, and I just sensed there was that saying, there's the elephant in the room. I just sensed that people thought this was a crock of shit. And I said, so I thought I'll go with this. I said that, put your hand up if you think this is a crock of shit already. And 4 people put their hand up. And I thought the reason was I wanted to lean into it and just acknowledge that was the fact, and acknowledge they were feeling that way, rather than me sitting there trying to convince them that it's not. And I think that eased the tension in the room. It eased the anxiety in the room of those people who are like, who's this guy we've never met coming from this company I've never heard of, telling us about how we should be feeling at work and talking about emotion. And so my approach is to get people to acknowledge what they're feeling, or acknowledge their belief or their mindset, and then say, as I did in that workshop, I said, I might not convince you that this matters, but let's go through this and play this game and then have a discussion at the end of it. So I'm all for front footing it, and front footing it with that woman. And that first workshop was just letting her rant, letting her have her say. So yeah, that's sort of my style to it, is let's acknowledge the fact that people might not be into this and have a play. And from my experience, people tend to respond to that, because the normal consultant walks in the room and goes, I'm right, listen to me. Not the more macho sort of type consultants will go, yeah, I'm the expert, believe what I believe. If not, it's not going to work.
Oh, yeah. Thank you.
Yeah. So hopefully that was a long-winded response to your question, but yeah, I've certainly experienced it a lot, and the less adversarial it can be, the better the approach is. Yeah. Sure. What were you going to ask?
I've got a couple. Well, I've got a few actually, but one I posted on the Slack is, I guess I'm seeing some emotions that might be missing around the sad quadrant, and I guess it's really relevant at the moment in terms of the sense of loss, grief, despair, powerlessness, to name a few. And I guess also my experience with emotion work is that people tend to go to the higher order emotion that's probably comes from the kind of anger space, but it's really the mask for sadness or disappointment. And so I'm just conscious, what do we do when we're kind of identifying that there are some emotions that actually would be worthy to have in the pack that are missing? Do you create your own? Like, have you come across that before?
Yeah, I'd add some in there. Like with certain leaders, I've taken cards out based on what they've told me before sessions. So they've decided that they didn't want these ones in there, certain ones, because of the team environment. And my natural reaction to that, or my first reaction to that, was that I don't think we should do that. But ultimately, I don't lead the team. And often the teams that I'm working with, I don't know very well to begin with. And I just then trust the leader of the team to make the right decision. So in my experience, I've pulled certain emotions out. I haven't added them in, but there's no reason why you couldn't work with the team leader to go, which emotions, which feelings aren't in the pack that you think would be worthwhile to put in there. I think that's a really nice thing. And if you did it in conjunction with the leader, it becomes a co-creative thing rather than you as the consultant just adding them in there. So there's more buy-in from the leader as well. So I certainly think that could be easily done. There's probably not enough blank cards in the pack for you to do that. So it'd be a case of just printing some out, and then even laminating them. One option.
I've got a laminator.
One option you could do is, if there's ones that come up time and time again, is print some and laminate them, and you have them to add in or to the pack as you need it.
I just think that's kind of a bit, there is something about that's missing for me, because even, take COVID away and what we're experiencing right now, you think about like a restructure, for instance, there can be quite a lot of feeling of loss of what's not, what people leaving, guilt, kind of survivor guilt, all of those kinds of things could be floating around. And I think there's some context or some kind of triggers in workplaces where those sadder emotions don't feel like as full in the pack as perhaps some of the other emotions. So just thinking there's actually other contexts beyond COVID where people can actually feel those emotions of, or they might have joined a team and they're not vibing with the team, so they might feel isolated or lonely. So I just think there's something about maybe beefing up the sadness part of it, because I think the others are really well represented.
In the short term, we don't have them, but please feel free to do that and add some in there. I certainly think that's a really, really good idea. And then maybe in due course, we might add like a little extension pack, right? Some additional feelings that people could print and then laminate themselves to use. Yeah.
Can I add something there?
Please.
So when I've run a few of these things, and even one-on-one with some clients, where there's not, I guess where the emotional granularity is missing, we can tease it out through the stories that they have around, some of the top level emotions that they've got, and so and help them that way get to, those emotions that might not be listed in here, but are underlying for the feelings of, say, being paralyzed or whatever. I'm just looking at the cards now. And then and then from that, you know, that they can then maybe rewrite a list or you know, add that in. So it's actually also a really good way to develop the emotional granularity with people, because people, we don't have it. Like, we just don't. We go to the usual sad, angry, whatever. You know what I mean? And so it's a good way to help people develop that. And through the story part of, you know, okay, so tell me more what's going on with that, then it helps to tease those cards out without them necessarily being there. But I do get what you're saying in terms of, you know, it's good to have them because of, I guess, in some ways, that lack of emotional granularity, to say that, oh, okay, I'm sad, and then tease out what's going on as well. But then you can, I guess, kind of reverse engineer it.
Because sad's not even the pack, is it, Jeremy?
No, sad's not in there. And the reason why some of those real high order emotions aren't in the pack is that early on in testing, when I had sad and happy in the pack, for instance, just teams time and time again through that testing picked those cards out of things that they absolutely wanted people to feel and didn't want people to feel. And for me, through that testing, I thought, that's obviously interesting and a good place to start, but it doesn't help us go any deeper or go any further. And if every team says we want people to feel happy and don't want them to feel sad, it's sort of like, that's hygiene. That's almost hygiene from my perspective. Like, of course we want people to feel happy, and of course we want them to don't want them to feel sad, but what's beneath that? That's that lower order stuff you're talking about there, Cheryl. What's beneath that that's driving that? So that's why I ended up taking them out, because it was just hijacking every session that was happening in the happening, especially when you only give people a chance to pick out 5. And every time sad and happy was in the list. And I was like, well, now we've only got 4 left to play around with and to find out more information. So that was the reason why they disappeared from the pack at about version 3, I think it was.
Jeremy, is there a reason why frustrated's not in there?
A similar sort of one again. Frustrated for me is a symptom of an underlying or some underlying emotions or feelings. That's an outcome of feeling powerless, or an outcome of feeling disheartened, or whatever it might be. Frustrated then becomes that thing. So that was the reason why I didn't put it in there. However, frustrated is probably the number 1 card that I see get written onto the blank cards. But for me, it's another example of how that's a top level label that we've got, but we aren't able to go any further, because frustrated encompasses that thing that we're not able to then pinpoint. So I still let people write frustrated in, because that's an autonomy piece that they're allowed to, that I encourage. But I'm also trying to encourage people to go deeper, to think, be even more conscious or aware of what might be leading to that frustration there. So
for those of you interested, on the Slack channel, I posted this Junto emotion and feelings wheel, and that's what I do a lot of my work with already. And so even just hearing this conversation of frustrated, it's actually on the outer side of the anger wheel. So it goes anger, exasperated, then that breaks into agitated and frustrated. But for some reason, the way we label frustration, we almost take it up to the higher order, and it kind of sits alongside anger. And so I agree. I do think we code it higher level, but in the emotion wheel, it's actually a lower order, you know, granular emotion. I find it fascinating. I find this wheel really helpful. But I love the tactile nature of the cards. So it's kind of just working out, how do you broker some of the deeper conversations around particularly the sadness quadrant or wedge. I find that quite a fascinating place to play.
Cheryl, do you share that wheel with clients or teams? Because what I'm thinking is, perhaps you know, in a workshop, it could something like that could be shared to give people an understanding of, okay, well, that word's not there, but actually, if I think about it, I can see it's you know, paralyzed, and that card is there. So you know, I don't know, is that something you share at the start?
I haven't shared it alongside the motion work, the motion culture deck work, but I am thinking more, even that's why this conversation is useful, in terms of actually how would you do that. And then I'm also conscious, how do you do that without overwhelming people with language? So I definitely use it in my one-on-one coaching. Like, it's absolutely a massive tool, my toolkit, for people who are either at burnout or just some kind of distress. Because, and it's been getting a hammering, as you can imagine, over the last kind of few weeks. And I send it with some supplementary resources around the name it to tame it process, in terms of the research that says if we name our emotions, we can process them so much more effectively. So So, so it's definitely part of my toolkit, but I think where it's lacking is that tactile and that gamification thing is what I love about the culture deck. And, you know, I think that has a really different kind of impact.
I love that emotion wheel as well, Cheryl. Thanks for sharing that the other day.
That's okay.
I don't have it here, but I bought the School of Life emotion wheel. It's a very basic form of that, and it's got a little yeah, there we go. Yeah, that's the thing. Yeah, emotional barometer, which is really cool. That sort of makes it a little bit tactile and gamifies it. But
got cards in there too.
Yeah, for the definitions of it. But I love the idea that, well, my thinking anyway is that most of the people we're going to be working or running group workshops with at a group level aren't going to have the language to start with. So this is, if you think about level 1 to maybe if we go level 10 is highly emotionally aware, conscious, and level 1 is not emotionally aware, not emotionally intelligent whatsoever. And at group level, generally speaking, I think we're probably at a 2 or a 3 across the board. Maybe there's some teams who are along that spectrum, but the emotional culture deck will help us move from level 1 to 5, and then introducing the emotion wheel once the team is used to the conversation, maybe after 6 or 7 months, and they're open, they're vulnerable, they're having these conversations, they've got some basic labels. Then we go, okay, levels 5 to 10 are now, let's get a granular understanding of each of the labels, each of the emotions and what they mean and how they might impact it. But we can't go straight to level 7. I think we have to scaffold our way up to there. So I love the idea of introducing that wheel with certain people who are at a higher level of understanding. Even down to the fact an example around those emotions is a podcast I was listening to the other day, talking about the difference between disappointment and anger. And the definition that, I think it was, who was it? It might have been Mark Breckett who wrote the book, which still hasn't arrived from Amazon, unfortunately, Permission to Feel. And he said that
I'm reading that at the moment.
Okay, yeah, I think it was him.
On
anyway,
Kindle.
So anger, disappointment is when you've got expectations and those have been missed. But anger is when there's a sense of injustice. And I love the difference between that, because sometimes people say, well, I'm really disappointed, or I'm angry, but they're just disappointed because expectations have been missed and they're mislabeling their emotion that they're feeling. And I love the simple duality of that breakdown of those two. But
it's like dismay and disappointment, you know, though, and there's just so much nuance in it. Like I use that example all the time with clients to say, actually, if I feel dismayed, it's quite a different sense of feeling to being disappointed, or disillusioned is different again.
And anger and frustration are the same thing. People say they're angry, but they're actually frustrated, because anger is actually a very fleeting emotion. You know, you feel anger initially, and then it kind of moves out of your body and then turns into frustration. So true anger doesn't last. It's momentary and then develops onto other things. But people say, oh, I'm angry, but really they're actually frustrated.
It's an opportunity to get curious, isn't it? Because anger is the trigger for a deeper emotion.
Absolutely.
Yeah, and so most of our teams will be at level 1 to 5, there sort of thing. So let's help them get to level 5, and then we can introduce that conversation. My fear is that if you go straight for that deeper conversation with the emotion wheel, that then becomes overwhelming and paralyzing. And we're already, the majority of people are already cynical about this. So then if we introduce another complex, convoluted academic discussion about this, it's another barrier. Yeah. And so
would you do some pre-work though? Like, would you potentially, to help them tease out a bit more, send them some pre-work, or send them some pre-information about, you know, deeper language, or not necessarily even deeper, but other words that we can use for the same thing?
I guess you could. I personally don't like to do that once again, because I think if your first interaction in a workshop is you having to sit down and read a whole bunch of this emotion research that you don't really believe in anyway, then it's going to be it's just going to reinforce your cynicism or your belief that it doesn't matter. And then when you come in the room, you've got even more of a task to do, because you've reinforced their belief already. That's that backfire effect piece where no matter what.
Depends on your relationship with the team though, Simon. Like I've got a number of teams where I've done other stuff with them for over a period of time. So there's a high level of trust and connection that I could actually go and do some pre-work, and then but still, to Jeremy's point, I still think you'd need to start at the scaffolding end, because it's a new concept. But if it's a brand new team that you hadn't worked with before and you just, you know, then I think you could have a backfire effect there. So it just depends on your level of rapport and connection already.
Yeah, definitely right. Definitely right. I've been thinking about it, the gym analogy, right? When you go to a personal trainer, they don't start you on a bench press or a squat of 120 kgs. Start by learning the basics. You build rapport with the trainer. You learn about the gym. You get comfortable with your surroundings, and slowly you work your way to doing the thing on the Olympic bar. But it just takes a bit of time and patience. There's no silver bullet for it, which we talk about. It just takes time and consistency to get there. But certainly, you don't want to overwhelm. I believe you don't want to overwhelm people too much when this conversation is already a very uncomfortable one for people. Yeah. Yeah.
Good point.
But sure, I love your idea of adding cards in there. I really love it. And then if you do add some cards in there and you wanted to share them, I could design them up for you as well and then send them back as a PDF so you could cut them up and have them branded if you wanted.
Awesome. Thank you.
Yeah.
I might take you up on that.
Okay. Yeah, no problem. Just send it through in the Slack group at any time and then we can certainly make that happen. Yeah. Because I'm sure that'll help other people as well. I'm sure there'll be other people who've had a similar question or a similar idea or aren't sure if they should or not, but I love the idea. I think you should definitely try it.
Cool. Sounds great.
Yeah. Nat, what question? We'll come back to your other one, Cheryl, in a second. Nat, what did you have? What are you pondering?
I've got a couple of questions, but so could you give a couple of examples where a group has taken the process in an unexpected direction, either spontaneously during your workshop or something that the leader wanted to do?
Yeah, nice. Really good question. Really good work putting me on the spot here. I love this. But the very first thing that comes to my mind, the most unexpected moment in a workshop I've ever had or in a project was with a digital marketing agency here. And we went through the process with the senior leadership team, then went to their staff and then came back together as a senior leadership team to consider both. And that senior leadership team ended up defining a list of top three. They really like three. They're quite concise team. And the three were, I wish I could remember the terms, but what happened was we had this aha moment. We looked at those three things that we wanted our people to feel and we went, holy moly, that's what we want our customers to feel too. And then we looked at the list of the things they didn't want their people to feel and we're like, wow, we don't want our clients to feel those things. And there was this moment where we went, wow, these things are intertwined. They're connected here. I think powerless was on their list of the things they absolutely didn't want their people to feel. And they're like, well, we absolutely don't want our clients to feel powerless either in the digital marketing space. They're like, they want their clients to feel empowered to then make even better decisions and even more in tune decisions around their digital marketing. And that moment for me was a real aha moment and for the team because we saw the interconnection between how their people are feeling inside their organization versus how their clients potentially might not, and how they want them to feel. And that was really unexpected. That was quite early on. That was only about version 5 or 6 of the game as well. And I was like, wow, okay, there is a connection here. And now that opens up a whole nother world of conversation with the team from a consulting perspective anyway, but also from a leadership perspective. Okay, actually now, how does our people feeling those things impact our clients or our customers? So it's a question I'll often ask now in workshops, sometimes at the halfway break. So I was working with the sales team last year and at halfway, when we came back from the break, I said, just for a moment, let's park what we've just gone through, go back through the cards and now pick out what you'd want your clients to feel and not feel. And then with another team I played around with at the break or after the break, why don't pick out 2 cards that you think your customers are currently feeling now. And that was a sales team. And so the leader of the sales team got a snapshot of what his people thought their customers were feeling right now. And so those are little things you can play around with in workshops and in an ongoing basis. If you're working on an ongoing basis with a team, which I think is a really nice way to connect what we're talking about internally with our external environment, so with our customers. So it's not just, we're not only talking about this in isolation inside our company, but we're also connecting it to what's happening and who's important, which is the people we serve. Yeah. So
there's a customer experience deck, isn't there?
Yeah, there is. Yeah. So,
and is that is that so different from what you're kind of talking about now, that they'd be almost two separate processes?
It's different, but it's the same. And that's going to sound strange. There's some different feelings, there's different emotions
games,
in there.
similar.
Yeah, the process is really similar. It's just, there's not as many steps in it. It's a little bit more concise because you've, but you can use, depending on how creative you are, like I use the emotional culture deck for customer conversations just because I've used the game, both games enough that I can get creative and hack this game to have a customer conversation. The customer version of it just takes you through it step by step. But in that conversation I talked about where I said, pull out the cards that your customers are feeling, I just used the cards that were in here and made that question up in the session. So technically you don't have to have the customer version. You could use this. You just have to get a little bit creative. But those are my favorite moments where people go, oh, wow, okay, this actually impacts our customers, or this could impact our customers, or what does this mean for how we engage our customers? Those are really cool moments that I've seen teams have. And I've also had aha moments. So that's definitely the first thing that came to mind when you said what's been the most unexpected.
Oh, that's great. Thanks.
It really helps as well if you're working with a customer facing team, because that's their language. Like sales teams, they're used to talking about customers a lot. So even though our focus of the session was the performance and how we become a more high performing team internally, it's still a nice way to segue to the ultimate person they're serving, which is their customer. Yeah. I should have a list of the most unexpected things now that you asked that question. I'm going to be more prepared in the future, right? What else has been unexpected?
Right, we can move on to another question.
One more. But I guess one more, and I think I sort of talked about it in the course. So you might not have got here yet, but you might get there in the course. But really early on in the testing version 4 or 5, I gave the game to a local government body here in New Zealand, and pardon me. And the condition of me giving them the game or selling them the game early was that I could go along and watch one of their workshops, because they didn't want me to go and be involved. They didn't need a consultant. They just wanted to use the game themselves with their HR team. And their HR team consisted of about 30 people with health and safety, HR compliance, people and culture, that the spectrum for their HR team. And the first thing they did was switch the question, not to how do we want our people to feel internally, but how do we want they defined our people as in the staff of their stakeholders. So how do we want our people, the people who deal with us as an HR team, to feel when they're dealing with us, when we're engaging with those people? And when I first heard that, I was like, damn it, they're not following the instructions in the pack of cards. This is early on, right? And I was like, this is going to be a train wreck. But in that session, I realized that you can actually use the game for that conversation. It's sort of a customer conversation again, right? But an internal customer. But my first initial response, my instinctive response was, damn, you're doing it wrong. I want to stop you. I want to show you how to do it properly. But then I realized what they were doing was really creative and ingenious in a sense, because it wasn't what I designed the game for. And my lesson from that was, when people just go on slight tangents, I sometimes let them go on that tangent for a little bit and just see what comes of it, rather than going, no, that's not how you do it. Because the best results I've had have come from teams who've maybe even misunderstood me a little bit and then had a different conversation, and something amazing's come from it. The question then becomes how, if it doesn't go well, how you bring people back to where you wanted them. But don't be afraid just to be a little bit curious and see where they go if they get the question slightly wrong or they use it in a slightly different manner, because something really amazing might come from it, like they did with that local government team. I was like, okay, well, now they're having a conversation I never even expected they were going to have, and that's going to ultimately help them even more than what I designed the game for. So if you can, I know it was difficult for me, is let that conversation go a little bit, see where it goes, and then go, okay, actually we've gone off topic, let's come back, or maybe we need to explore that more. Yeah. So those two certainly stick out of my mind as like massive unexpected outcomes or conversations that I didn't know were going to happen, or I definitely didn't design the game for certain. Yeah.
Great. Thanks.
Yeah. Okay. What do you have another question there? Well, we might as well ask.
I do.
Yeah, go for it. Go.
Does anyone else? No?
You go for yours and then we'll
Yeah,
back around.
have you got any tips for running the Map Your Emotional Culture workshop with a group of leaders from a sector rather than from an organization?
So specific sectors, do you mean?
Well, in my case, it'll be the...
Okay. Yeah, so you mean leaders who are, they don't work for the same company.
That's right. Yeah,
Okay.
but they're within the same sector and they want to
Yep.
see the emotional culture of the sector shift.
Ah, interesting. No, I don't right this second, but I will. I'm going to think about that for a little. I'm going to think about that. So just for context, or are you thinking about running a workshop with a whole bunch of leaders from different, from the sector? Is that what you're saying that might occur?
Yes.
Okay, interesting. I love that idea. I've run sessions with disparate leaders, so leaders from different companies coming together. The way I normally frame that up is more of a learning how to use the game so they can then go away and use it with their teams. But you could reframe the question, I think really simply maybe, and go, what are the predominant feelings you see inside your organizations? The one caveat with that is we're taking a bit of a leap of faith going that we trust that they're observant and they can recognize what emotions might be predominant within their teams. Because let's say, I don't know, trucking, I'll just use that as an example. If we got a whole bunch of CEOs of trucking companies together and we said, flick through the cards and pull out the top 3 cards that you think that you see inside your company being expressed. And then you could see the differences. But we're relying on the fact that those people can accurately recognize or observe emotions in their workplace. But there's no reason why that couldn't happen if we were sure that they were good at recognizing and observing those emotions.
It's a challenge you'd have anyway.
Oh, exactly. Yeah. Although we're not generally in the game, we don't pose the question, how do you think people are feeling? We say, how do you propose, or how would you like them to feel, or how should they be feeling? So there's a slight difference in those 2 questions there.
True.
Although I have used the game to say, how do you think people are feeling? In the same way that I say that for the custom one, how do you think your customers are feeling right now? But in an ideal world, let's say all of the leaders of that sector were observant and they had access to the language and the labels to describe how they thought their teams were feeling. You could simply ask that question, what do you think the predominant emotions are, the predominant emotions that are being expressed inside your teams? And then if everybody is holding up the word paralyzed, then it's not, I don't think we should take it as gospel, but it's certainly something that you could then look to explore further, or there's some insight in that, right? The leaders think that's happening, so there's something there. I wonder what that is. Let's explore that further. So I think it comes down to the question, how you frame that question up.
Yeah, and from what you've said also about people's ability to not just familiarity with the language around emotions, but also their ability to see the perspective of others.
Yeah, which is...
while you're talking about it, I was kind of thinking you almost need to, like, to get people into the swing of that, you'd almost need to start with, what are you feeling? What do you think your teams are feeling? What's your organization feeling? What do you think is the emotional culture in the sector at the moment? And actually tease those out so that people can see what's either consistent or different at sort of different levels of that experience.
I love your leveling up of that, the way that you move from the granular I individual to then across the sector. There's a couple of things there for me. One, context is really big when it comes to the emotional culture of a team, the context of that team. So there might be a context within the sector, but there could be wildly varying emotional cultures based on just individual leaders within that company. Because if you've got a leader who is controlling, authoritarian, then there might be a culture of suppression or a culture of fear there. Afraid might be the dominant emotional culture, for instance. But yet you could have somebody in the sector who's open, transparent, and provides autonomy for their people. And then they're going to have a completely different emotional culture from that company, even though they're in the same sector. So there's that to keep in mind. Yeah. But I certainly think there could be scope, depending on the scope of your own project or your own consulting there, is going, I wonder what sort of macro data we could collect across the industry. So let's quantitatively survey the sector at an individual level, at an employee level, to find out what they believe are the most dominant emotions being expressed inside their sector or their company. And then you could then do it with the leaders and you could compare and contrast. That would be a really fascinating step to take. And there's a really great article, which is in the research, which we share in the course, called How to Measure Your Emotional Culture, I think it is. It's by Seagal Bassard, Mandy O'Neill, so the same people who wrote the #1 article that inspired the work. And when they measure emotional culture inside a company, they don't ask, how are you individually feeling? They ask, what emotions do you see being expressed around you? And there's a really subtle difference in that. And because, and I love that as well. I designed an app last year, a very bad prototype of an app where we used that question as a baseline to start measuring emotional culture of teams. But the overwhelming response from leaders was going, I don't want to know what my people think of other people. I just want to know what they believe. But in that article, and I haven't read it in about a year now, but I want to go back to it now. And I definitely think you should read that, because it'll be related to your question here, is that it's by asking what do we see around us, we get more of an objective view on the emotional culture. Because if I'm feeling unbelievably angry right now, I'm going to be biased to think that that's happening always in the team, rather than me going, well, I'm feeling angry, but the team at a team level, the group effect isn't anger, it's just me. The group effect might be different, but it takes a lot of self-awareness to make that distinction. And so they say, how often do you see anger being expressed around you? And that becomes the way that they measure the emotional culture at a team level. Which is why I based that question that I suggested to you on. You would ask the leaders, what emotions do they see being expressed around them? What are the predominant ones? Yeah.
It's interesting, Jeremy. It's kind of got me thinking about, suppression, because people could say they actually, declare how they're actually feeling, but actually people could be quite shocked to know that they're feeling that, because particularly in Kiwi culture, we suppress a lot of emotion. So I'm a little bit challenged by that, because I can see actually, can absolutely get the difference between what you're feeling and what you're seeing expressed. But then I'm going, could there be a backfire effect in terms of actually people seeing a whole lot of calm and people pretending rather than when they declare actually what they're feeling, so could there be richness the other way as well? It's interesting, isn't it, in terms of the behavior versus the actual feeling, the expression.
Yeah. And so then in the app we designed, we made it a dual thing. So you express how you're currently feeling, so your current state, and then the part B of the question was, what are you seeing around you? But if we think that if we understand and reinforce the fact that emotional culture is mainly from what the research says, seen in micro behaviors, expressions, tones, that sort of thing, then if we've got the language and we've been having this discussion, it's going to be far easier for us to pick up on that. But it might be difficult going into a company from day dot and going, what emotions are you seeing expressed? Because we've never even talked about having emotion at work. So we don't even know what to look for. So that might be a thing that happens down the track rather than from day one, potentially. But certainly read the article. It's in the list of articles. I think I share at the end or the starts saying, here's the research. And I think it may be second or third on the list, but it's really, really powerful. Yeah.
Thank you.
Great. Thank you.
Nice. Astrid, do you have more questions, or are you okay just listening in at the moment?
It's okay to listen at the moment.
Nice.
Yeah.
Cool.
If you could, I think I missed the Slack channel. Is there a Slack channel for this course?
Yeah, not for the course. So when you've graduated, when you've finished the course, you'll get an invitation to join the Elephant Rider community.
Okay, cool.
Yeah, so as soon as you finish it, you'll get that invitation. You can come and join us. Yeah.
Oh, that's great. And then I can see the wheel of emotions.
Yeah, then you'll see everything in there. So there's about 150 of us in there now who are sharing ideas and stories and experiences. But yeah, it's for once you become an official Elephant Rider, that's what that Slack group is for. Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah. So maybe an incentive to finish the course quicker.
Oh.
Cheryl, what about you? What were some of the other follow-up ones?
I'm really interested about the sustainability of practice and the reinforcement piece. And, you know, it's not just, this doesn't just happen with the emotional culture deck work, it happens with lots of different types of workshops. And so I just wonder what you're doing to actually kind of, you know, I think people come away quite fizzed and excited about this work. I know Lottie, one of your pro riders, does some follow-up workshops, which I think is really prudent. But even beyond that, you know, how are you dealing with the challenge of people, the leaders, taking a real interest in actually kind of brokering these conversations and really embedding it into the culture and the ways of working of a team?
Nice, great question. And I just actually shared something in Slack last week, I think it was, hey Simone, a 12-month program to make this a priority. So before I bring up that slide and show you it, once you've finished the course and you're in the Slack community, you can download it. But you bring up a really good point around how do we keep the conversation alive? How do we embed it? And from the beginning, even before I started doing this emotional culture work, my philosophy has been based on the idea that we need to create as many moments as possible about this conversation. And just doing it every 6 months at a strategic away day, as you will have experienced yourself, probably, Cheryl, is not enough to keep the conversation alive. It doesn't become ritualistic. The more we talk about it, the more it becomes normal, the more it's familiar with us, and the more we can then challenge each other, but also celebrate the conversations. And so I've been working with 2 teams, one for a year, one for 2 years, using the emotional culture deck. And there's 2 other clients here in New Zealand that have been using the game over a year now. And I've been not formally working with them, but just working with them because I've been loving learning from how they're doing it. And then we've been throwing ideas around, suggesting different ways. And we've now got what I think is a 12-month plan for how you can use the emotional culture deck. One for consultants, because that helps us then go, this is a plan I think could be put in place. But 2, from a leadership perspective, to go, okay, I can see what we need to do roughly to make sure this becomes more than just a fancy thing we've done as a one-off. Nice. And at the core of that is this other belief that I've really come to love recently, that in my consulting work for a long time, we sort of came in and we set the values and the purpose and the vision, and then we never really did much else apart from maybe create some road shows and talk about them internally. But it was at a cognitive culture level, it tends to be more of an existential thing, an eternal thing. So our values are, these core values are core values because they're core to who we are. Your core values, depending on who you believe and who you read, shouldn't change. And that's up for debate, depending on if you listen to Jim Collins or Patrick Lencioni or SY Partners or whoever it might be, right? But if we take the conversation or the thread of thought that you define your core values, they're core to who you are, and they should stay that way. There's no reason to come back and renegotiate them. That's not the right word, is it? But
redefine
them, to reestablish them. But what I've realized working with this one team over 2 years is that their emotional culture has changed massively over 2 years. Because when I started working with them, they went through a huge restructure, new CEO, merger of a team, plus people leaving, more people coming in. And it's been amazing to see their growth and see the team change. And every 6 months, what we did was we got back together and redefined the baseline of the emotional culture. I don't want to use the word reset, but it was more a reevaluation. So in the first workshop I did with them ever, we did the Map Your Emotional Culture workshop, although it was a very rudimentary version of it 2 years ago. And then 6 months later, we got back together and went, okay, what do we think it now? What do we believe it is now? Because for the last 6 months, we've been working in a lot more caring and kind culture, because that was at the heart of what they wanted to be successful. And we did it again, and it changed a little bit. I think 3 of the 5 stayed in there, but 2 changed. And I was like, okay, this is an unexpected thing probably now. I was like, okay, well, that's cool and interesting. And then we did it again 6 months later, and then 3 popped out and only 2 stayed on it, and 3 new ones came in. And I'm like, okay, so this is an evolving thing, like an organism, like we are as humans, we're changing based on context, environment. And so that got me thinking, okay, if we're going to do a 12-month program, well, the first step is to run the Map Your Emotional Culture workshop as it's roughly designed now. And then for 6 months, focus 1 per month on one of the core desired feelings. So let's say inspired, free and brave and curious were the top 4 in my 4. So on month 1, the team would focus on brave and get together as a team and go, okay, what do we need to be doing as a team now to feel more brave? What rituals, what experiments, what behaviors do we need to see? And for a month, you'd focus on that. And at the end of the month, you get back together and review what happened. You decide to keep certain things, and then you go, okay, what should we focus on next? And the team might go, we want to focus on curious. So for the next month, you focus on curious. How can we create a more curious environment? How can we feel more curious? What can we do? And you cycle through the 5. So at the end of the 6-month period, you've set the baseline. You've had a conversation each month about the 5. You put rituals, behaviors in place. You've discarded some that didn't work, and you've kept a whole bunch of stuff. And then you, at the 6th month, you reevaluate. Okay, what is it now? Has it changed? Do we still want them to be core? And then you do the same thing. And the 2 teams have done that, have seen unbelievable engagement, increases in engagement, increases in the culture of their team. One of the anecdotal pieces of feedback from somebody in one of the teams was, I feel more safe now to cry in a team meeting. And they work in a really high stress, another construction thing, funnily enough, environment where previously they felt suppressed and they couldn't express how they were feeling. But now the quote was, I feel like it's okay to cry in a meeting now. And that for me is the ultimate sign that there's a psychological safety within the team.
Yeah.
And so they follow that process. So roughly, I think at the moment, that's what we're following for like a 12-month thing. You do it once, focus on the top 5 just for the desired, and then you reevaluate and then do it again. And then over a year, you've had 10 or 12 team meetings, team sessions where you're openly discussing how we want to feel, how we don't want to feel, being vulnerable, talking about rituals. And those 4 teams that have done it, it's only 4 I know, but those 4 teams have seen remarkable increases in what we're gathering, psychological safety and engagement of the teams. Yeah.
And how has that resulted for those teams that you've worked with over a long period of time? What other results have they witnessed? As a result of increased psychological safety, what knock-on effects has that had for their businesses?
2 things. They measure their engagement through it's not-for-profit, so it's called Let's Talk, I think. So they're watching that at a pure numerical basis. They're watching that go up, so that's exciting. So the board is seeing the work they're doing is having an impact. The other things are less measurable, but the impact they're having in the community on the sport that they're delivering and administrating. The biggest impact I've seen anyway, working with the team, is their relationships now with how they engage in the community. We're not measuring that. We're just seeing it. We're measuring community engagement, but also the anecdotal, how those people are going out, the relationships they're building based on what's been built inside. So they're far more comfortable and far more open and being transparent and vulnerable with the community that they're administrating the sport with, which is really exciting. And that's niche to their industry.
Yeah.
But that we're seeing that conversation internally flow over to how they're dealing with their external partners or the communities they're serving. So
excellent.
Previously that couldn't happen because there was a culture of suppression previously. There was, with the one team I'm talking about now, there was fear. There was no psychological safety. It was command and control based on the leadership team that was running that. But over the last 2 years we've been doing it. It's phenomenal to see the difference in their approaches. But we've created moments of conversation at a consistent basis. It wasn't, we do it 6 months, do it 6 months later, do it 6 months later. It was, we do it, and then we've created these rituals. The ritual is the monthly meeting to brainstorming session to go, let's focus on this one feeling.
Are you involved in that, Jeremy, or is that leader led?
I've been involved in that, yeah.
Right. Yeah. So there's still very much a consultant led approach in terms of the 12-month program. Yeah.
Yeah. For that particular client, funny you should say that though, because I'm just planning the next, I think we're going to do it in October or August, the next part of it. And I'm going to actually, so we're 2 years into, or coming up, this is going into the second year. And I'm actually going to now involve the leader and some of his team in running that themselves now. Yeah. So this is my gentle nudge to them, slowly then taking it fully on themselves, because I don't want to continue not because I don't like working with them. In fact, it's my most rewarding work I'm doing, some of the most rewarding work I'm doing, but we really need to get to the point where they're now empowered to completely own that from now on.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Cool. Thank you. That's awesome.
That one page of plan, I'm actually uploading that into the Slack group. I've created a video on it that's in the Slack group at the moment. But yeah, that 1 month, that 1 year program, I think is going to unlock so much. And that, it doesn't mean you have to be slave's the wrong word. You don't have to be constrained by that exact program, right? I know that works with companies, but you can add different stuff into it. You can change it a little bit, add to it. But as a core structure, I think it's a really simple way to create an ongoing conversation over a year-long period. And a year sounds like a crazy long time, but it's not actually. When you get to the end of the year, you're like, wow, look how much we've done and look how far we've come. Yeah. So certainly that would be the place to start. I'll come back to maybe one more point on that, is that if we don't have a leader who really believes in this, it's unfortunately going to fail. And I'm upfront with people about that, and I've learned that the hard way with certain teams I've worked with. But the leader of the team has to be the most engaged, the most passionate, the most driven when it comes to the conversation. If it's only purely consultant, the leader of the team I'm working with, he believes in this more than anybody. I'm just the one, he's just a little bit lazy and he prefers me to come in and run it for him. But he truly believes in it, and he makes sure it's a priority. So he ensures it's always on each agenda. Those meetings are in place. The conversation happens rather than, oh, we're too busy, let's do that for next time. So getting the buy-in of the leader is massive, because that old saying when dad says don't do drugs, but he's the one smoking pot out the back of the house every night, and you're like, well, what do I believe? The actions and behaviors, right? We need the leader to be the one who's going, this does matter. Yeah. Which makes it easy for me, because if the leader doesn't believe in it, then I say, well, unfortunately we can't do any work, and it's just the way it is. It can't be a box ticking thing. But sometimes I also realize consulting, sometimes you can't have that attitude, because you also need to generate business. So
well, also it can be a way of actually getting the leader on board, because it's an education piece in there. And so, just talking about it in concept for me can get a leader, semi-interested and excited, but I think they need to experience it just like the team need to experience it to really actually get on board. So I think sometimes that first one is actually an education piece to test out for yourself as a consultant, is to actually, is there a real strong appetite once they really know it? Yeah, exactly. Yeah. The other thing, I'm not sure, Nat and Astrid, if you're consultants or not, or coaches, but the other thing is it allows you as a consultant or a coach to then decide how much interaction you have, right? Because if you do say this is a 12-month thing and we need your buy-in for 12 months, then maybe you go in at month 1 and 6, and then they do the bits in between, and you're helping them from afar through that bit, and you do more reviews with them, or they might want your help every month, right? So you can scale how much interaction you have with them. So there's lots of you can get quite creative with how you then present it to the team you're working with. Because some teams, I do know other teams, one of the teams who's just done it on their own, like completely on their own. We've caught up for coffees and chatted on Zoom and been talking about it, but I'm not running anything with them. They're doing it completely themselves, which is really exciting as well. Yeah.
I've got maybe if we have a minute or so, we are already past.
Oh yeah, I've lost track of time. I could go for hours here. Yeah.
You talked about baselining the emotions. So let's say we have, identified these 5 emotions that we want people to feel. And then you continue working over a period of time. Do you kind of baseline these emotions like at month 1, where you say, okay, so maybe we want our team to feel curious. And at the moment we would say, maybe on a scale from 1 to 5 or 1 to 10, we think we are here at the moment. Do you then, maybe after 12 months, come back to this and say, okay, so looking at our emotions at the moment, what has changed? Do we actually see more of that? Or do you not?
Yeah, I have done that personally. And there's a piece in the course, I can't remember what lesson it is, but a piece on the course around tracking the emotional culture. And we've got a canvas for it that I use with clients. So when you get to that, you'll be able to see what we do. Okay. And I've done it with corporates, but I've also done it with sports teams as well. We put that canvas on the wall, and then you have the team emotions, and you get people to put a dot if they're not feeling it much or they're feeling it a lot. And there's also a story in the course around why I don't numerically index it from 1 to 5 or 1 to 10.
Mm-hmm.
So when you get to that lesson, there's a whole bunch of cool little stuff on that, which I think you'll find really interesting.
Awesome, thank you.
Yeah, and I'm about to do that for this project I'm planning now, the continuation of it. One of the things we're going to do is put that canvas back up on the wall and get people to put their dots based on same as what we did last season, because we work in seasons for the sports organization, and see how it's different. And it doesn't matter if it's different from me, because there'll be reasons why. What it does illuminate is, if we're curious, is then we go, okay, why is that the case? That's the most important part. So we measure it, but it can't be just the sake of measuring it for the sake of measuring it. It's got to be then, okay, why is that case? So why are we lower now than we were before? That's the most important part of that, I think. Yeah.